Today we're talking about lock extensions. Okay, so we're talking about lock extensions. We're gonna get right into it. I have questions that people have been asking about lock extensions. And if you have questions about lock extensions, feel free to ask. I'm gonna go down the list of questions that I have to answer those. But keep in mind, this is not just about lock extensions. So if you have any questions about locks, don't hesitate to ask. Let me get to these lock extension questions. Okay, Sandra said can't wait to cut her hair. She likes them short too. Just make sure that you're not in the new phase because you want to make sure that it doesn't unravel if it's too new. How can you start locks with previously relaxed hair? You need at least an inch and a half to 2 inches to start locking the root. I would recommend, I don't know what technique you're going to use to start locking your hair. If it's interlocking, you don't have to interlock the entire strand. You can just interlock just the new growth, and that new growth needs to be at least 1.5 to 2 inches. Um, but I will still do something with that loose hair. If you don't, the loose relaxed hair, if you don't interlock it, you can interlock the entire strand. Just keep in mind, as it grows out, the new growth look is going to look different from the interlock relaxed hair, because the interlock relaxed hair is not going to swell. It's going to stay skinny and limp and everything. So it's not going to swell. Or you can two-strand twist it or braid it to interlock, and then interlock the new growth. But just keep in mind that straight part, it's not going to swell or do anything. But it's best to do something with it, interlock it, braid it, or something so it does not bunch up over time. Okay, so someone asks, okay, still Chastity. Okay, well, should you start locks while your hair is in the middle of transitioning back to natural? You can still start locks. You're just going to have to make sure to keep the straight part straight or protected in some way so it doesn't bunch, because that hair is prone to bunch. So you want to make sure that you keep it protected. I've seen a lot of extensions coming out. Are they really long term? Okay, let's get into extensions. So when it comes to extensions, there are different ways different techniques people will use to install extensions. You can crochet the extensions. You can braid the extensions on. Some people two-strand twist the extensions. Some people sew in the extensions. So let me tell y'all my journey with lock extensions. When I first started doing locks, when I remember I had one client, she wanted to start her locks with extensions. She was young and her mom wanted to start with extensions. So I had that kinky hair, and I braided it about 1/2 inch, and then I two-strand twist it, and then they palm rolled for maintenance because the mom wanted something easy to maintain. So she palm rolled for maintenance. She will come back periodically to have me check on her hair and just to make sure everything was fine. None of her extensions ever slipped out, or none of the braids or twists never slipped out. And let me tell you why. She had coarse, she had thick, very tight curl pattern, and then she had the lock extension. And when I braided it, I split the hair into 3 and braided the extension, the kinky twist, the kinky hair on. I did not wrap and then braid. So her hair might have made it if I wrapped, but I just braided it on, and then the mom palm roll for maintenance. And for her hair, it worked. And it worked because of her curl, of her texture. That's one way I've done them in the past. I no longer do them that way. That was my immature way. I didn't do extensions back then. And the mom was like, can you just do something? So I did that. But Although that was my first, it turned out great. Nothing ever came out. I would not do them that way now because I'm more educated when it comes to locks and extensions. So I wouldn't do them. I would not recommend that route, but that is a way that you can use it. Not if y'all saw that lock extension slipped out video that I posted maybe last week or the week before, that she braided it on, but she did not split the client's hair. She kept the client hair as one and then kind of wrapped the extension around it. So that's why it was slipping. Another way I have done extensions is in the past, when people hair broke off, I would sew the extension on with, thread and needle. That's one way I used to do them. Like I said, this was 10 years ago. My expertise and my skills have increased since then because I've taken classes, I've educated myself. Okay. So that's one way I used to do it in the past. I would not recommend that way because when you're although you're sewing it on with thread and you're using the color thread of their hair, when they go to color their hair, that thread is not going to change color. And that sometimes that thread does give way, so it unravels. So it ends up separating because you're using thread and it's not meshing the hair together. So that's one thing to consider if you're using thread. That is not a method I would recommend now, since there are better way of doing that. Another extension method that I did, I had this Caucasian guy who wore his hair in a mohawk and he wore extensions. So, but we used the kinky hair over his straight hair. So I believed I braided his hair and then wrapped the extensions over it. I did that because that's the technique that his previous loctician was doing. So I just kind of did it to maintain, and he just came for a touch up. Is that a technique I would use now? No, because the weight of the extension that you're adding onto the hair with all that wrapping is too much hair. It's not balanced. So he ended up, so as they would get longer, he would cut them because of the weight, because it's a bunch of extensions that was not equally balanced for his own hair. So he would cut them as, but he eventually cut them later on. So these are stuff I used to do 10 years ago. So I'm telling you what I've done and why they don't necessarily work for people who are still using those methods and technique now in 2023, right? We're in 2023. Yeah, we're in 2023. So I would not recommend those techniques if you're trying to go for longevity. Crocheting is the best method for having extensions and having longevity with your extensions. Now, even if you crochet, will some of the extensions slip out? Maybe, maybe not. But it all depends on the person's crocheting technique and how well they do it to make sure hair isn't slipping off. So that's my journey with different ways I've done lock extensions in the past. Now, when I do extensions, or more so, I don't do extensions to install because it's too time consuming. And that tool that I use, especially for micro extensions, that tool is sharp. It's like a needle. I've pricked myself so many times, and people are going to say, oh, well, you just don't have a good technique. That's why you prick yourself. I don't care how good you are. You're going to, prick yourself here and there. Not as often. When you're more experienced, you won't be pricking yourself as often, but you're going to end up pricking yourself. So I don't like to do it for a whole head. If I have a client and they have some locks that broke off, or they cut some locks off or whatever, yes, I will put them back in. But to do extensions for a whole head just because you want length and thickness, first of all, extension is for length, not thickness. If your hair is fine before extensions, is going to be fine after extensions. So you might do it initially for thickness and it looks thick, but you got to think that grow out. If that extension started here, by the time it grows out and is here, what do you think the rest of your hair is going to look like? Do not do it for thickness, because it's not for thickness. It's more so for length. All right. Okay, Lehman. Okay. Is there a way of predicting how long it will take your locks to mature based on texture and length? Um, yes, you can kind of estimate. Typically, people with a tighter curl pattern, a rough cuticle, meaning their rough cuticle just pretty much equals to high porosity. Those hair tend to lock faster. That type of hair tend to lock faster. If you have a looser curl pattern, low porosity, smooth hair, that hair tends to take a little bit longer to lock. And I've also noticed thicker locks lock faster than smaller locks. The smaller the lock is, the longer it takes to lock because it's fewer strands and you need strands. You need hair. It needs family, right? To mat together. So when you have a really skinny lock, not a lot of hair in it, it takes a little bit longer to mat because it needs family to mat, if that makes sense. Um, Another thing that helps with the locking process is how often you shampoo your hair. I know some people say don't shampoo, don't shampoo, don't shampoo in the beginning stages, but water truly helps with the locking process. Every time you wash your hair, your just think about your natural hair, right? Your loose natural. Every time you wash your hair, it stretches. And when it dries, what does it do? It shrinks up. So when you wet your hair or wash your hair, it goes through that stretch, shrink motion. And as it goes through that, it's encouraging the hair to mat and lock. Just think about when you shampoo your loose natural hair and you go and you cut it and you wash it, it mats, right? Unless you're detangling and making sure it stays separate, it mats. So think about your locks in that same way. You go to wash it, it's going through that stretch, shrink process, and it's matting at the same time. So it encourages the hair to lock quicker. Hope that answers your question. I find that braid locks holds better. If you're going to, as long as you're not doing that other technique, if you're separating the client's hair into the three braids and then braiding the extension onto the three legs, I would say that is a technique that could work, but you have to make sure you're not putting that the extension that the hair extension is not thicker than the person's hair overall, because you don't want that braid to be so thick. Now you got that uh big old bulb or that bunching at the base of the lock when the hair grows out. So you want to make sure you're measuring the hair properly. I do know some people that start off that way, but you got to be mindful. That braiding technique, I would not use it on people with straight or straight hair or a loose curl pattern. With people with a looser curl, I would not use a braiding technique to start. Now, if they have like that really tight curl pattern, really kinky hair, they're going to have a better experience than someone with straight hair. It's going to slip out, especially when you wash your hair, that water hits it. The water creates movement, and if that person hair isn't kinky and have rough cuticles where it's gonna grab on to that extension, that loose curl pattern, smooth cuticle, it's gonna slip right on out if they're not very careful. And then you got to be mindful of styling, not too much tension. And you got folks they love to play in their hair, doing all this, doing all that. You're gonna pull them extensions out, especially after a shampoo. So I hope that makes sense. But the technique that I showed in that video that individual did, they did one leg of the person's hair and then took the extension and twisted it and started kind of wrapped it and started braiding. And that's not going to hold. That does not work. Someone said, I've seen a lot of extensions coming out. Are they really long term? Your best bet on a more long term lock extension is crocheting. Anything else, it really depends on your texture. It depends on your texture, your curl pattern. All of that makes a difference on how your extensions turn out and the technique of the extension. Is there a way to reduce frizziness by Ashley? If you have a looser curl pattern, your hair is more likely to be on the frizzy side. Um, you could you can crochet the frizzy hair into the lock to help, but keep in mind that's a technique you're gonna have to keep doing because as your hair grows, you're gonna have to crochet the hair, the new part that's being interlocked that's coming in. If you palm roll, you're going to it's going to reduce some of the frizzing because you have that product that's slicking it down. But keep in mind when you go to wash your hair, that product gets removed and you have to slick it down again with product. So I tell people frizziness does not really go away if it's your curl pattern that is causing the frizziness. Now, some people's hair are frizzy because of the poor technique that the person that their loctician might be using. If they have a tighter curl pattern and your hair is frizzy, it could be the technique. But if you have a looser curl pattern, it's just going to be frizzy. You can put products. You can use a mm, it it's just going to be frizzy. There's not a permanent solution to getting rid of frizz. All right, y'all. I'm gonna have to end our live and go get my son off the bus. His bus coming soon, so I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you so much.